Okay, last time we were talking about formal operations. Let's go to the PowerPoint. I believe we did this slide last time. If not, formal operational intelligence, we'll do it now. The formal operational intelligence is the ability to apply reasoning, right? Proper reasoning, if you will, operations to hypothetical issues. It's thinking about our thoughts, so to speak. Being able to concoct something, thinking about our thoughts. Piaget was talking about thinking about our thoughts and thinking about how we're thinking 50 years before information processing came up with metacognition. And what they say is, of course, that now I can think logically about abstract hypotheticals. I think we talked last time about the fog crept in on little cat's feet. Didn't we do that last time? Yes. Okay. But you'll see at the bottom here that some of the basic abilities to think in abstracts, I told you at the end about my cousin Linda, right? To think of X as an abstraction, that requires formal operational reasoning. So for instance, metaphors, understanding a metaphor. Okay? What do you mean? Fog doesn't have feet. That man's a house. That man, no, he's not a house, he's a man. Okay? Ironies. When you talk about, talking in ironies, wow. Somebody paints a picture, say, wow, that's the most unusual picture I've ever seen, which means it stinks, right? Mark Twain used to say, he was invited over a friend's house to see the friend's new baby. So it was the ugliest child I ever saw in my life. So the friend said, what do you think about my new baby? He said, now that is a baby, right? Well, that's true. But if you read between the lines, he's saying, that's about all I can say about it. Irony, double meanings of things, okay? There's a show that was on called Family Matters, right? Family Matters in the Family. That's the one where Steve Urkel was on, right? You know that one. That's a good show. Okay. Anyway, I like that show. He's so weird, it's funny. In any case, so it's family. There's Family Matters and Family Matters, right? People on a pre-operation, they have people who are not formal operational have a difficult time getting double and triple meanings from words, okay? The ability to isolate a variable. Here's what you do when you isolate a variable. You say, okay, I have 4 variables, okay, that could make a difference. Okay, it could be A, it could be, for instance, let's come back to me for a second. The period of a pendulum. Okay, this is the period. Here it goes, how many times it takes to swing? 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3. How many times in 15 seconds? So I give you a pendulum, and you can do the following. You can make the string longer or shorter. There are weights on the bottom. The bottom pendulum is a hook, so you can put heavier or lighter weights on it. You can drop it from wherever you want, and you can either drop it or you can throw it. Okay? So we're going to take a vote now. Those of you watching on television, I want you to take the vote. I want you to vote with me. How many people think that the length of the string, whether I make it longer or shorter, influences the period of the pendulum? It could be one or many of these. How many people think that the length of the string influences the period? Okay, most people. How many people don't? In other words, I can either have the string long and the pendulum will swing, or I can have a crank and I can shorten the string and the pendulum will swing. Who thinks that the length of the string makes a difference? Yeah, most people. How many people think the weight at the bottom makes a difference, whether I put a light weight or a heavier weight? Again, most people. How many people think whether I drop it high or low makes a difference? Will I drop it from here? Here's the thing. Will I drop it from here and let it swing like this, or will I drop it from here and let it swing like this? Yeah, just not a minority in this case. And how many people think whether I just let it go or give it a shove makes a difference? 2 or 3. Okay. The answer is, with kind of an exception, because I had a physicist friend who told me, but by and large, the answer is, the answer is only the length of the string. Okay? Now, not knowing that doesn't mean, wait, I'm trying to, not knowing that does not mean that you're not formal operational. But you would have to be able to figure it out. And what you would do is in your head, you would say, well, it could be A, B, C, or D. So I'll keep A, B, C constant test D. Then I'll keep A, B, D constant test C. And I'll keep it right. You have all the hypothetical possibilities, right? There's another one in which Piaget shows you have to mix some chemicals together and try to get yellow, right? Together with what he calls a standard. He has G, which he calls a standard. I think it's the French word for the standard thing. So it could be G and 1, G and 2, G and 3, G and 4, G1 and 2, G1 and 3, G1 and 4, G2 and 3, G2 and 4, right? G1, 2, and 3, G1, 2, and 4. All the possibilities. You're making them up in your head as you go along. Let's go back to the PowerPoint for a second. That's combinations and permutations. Ratios. Let me tell you what happens with ratios. Let's go over here. Okay? You have I'm getting there. You have short lady and tall lady. Wait a minute. Okay? And you have to... There we go. Pretty good, huh? Years. Okay. Short lady and tall lady. And you want to measure how tall they are. So what you do is you have strings of paper clips. Okay? You have big paper clips and little paper clips. So you measure short lady, and she's 4 big paper clips tall and 6 little paper clips tall, right? You understand? Then I go and measure tall lady. She's 6 big paper clips tall, right? And if you ask kids, so how many little paper clips tall would she be? Let's make it easy. She's 8 big paper clips tall. If you ask kids how many little paper clips tall is she, they'll tell you 10. 2 more. Instead of making a ratio, 4 is to 6, as 8 is to 12, right? They'll tell you 2 more, 10, right? And then you give it to them to measure, huh? And I had one kid try 3 times again, pulling and pushing and pulling the little ones and pushing them, trying to get it, pulling the big ones, trying to get it right. Okay? They don't understand ratio proportions. Okay? They don't isolate a variable. Now, this makes a difference. Come to me. Okay? I'm going to give you an example, an idea. There's a big question about whether to read Huckleberry Finn to kids in school and high school. Okay? By the way, one of the reasons that people, there's a story about trying to write the great American novel, how people are trying to do it and can't do it. That's because Mark Twain already did it. That's the great American novel. That's a wonderful book. That book, however, is full of metaphors, double meanings, sarcasm. Because Twain said if I had written what I really wanted to write, they never would have published it. It's the great American novel against prejudice and bigotry. Okay? It's a magnificent novel. You ought to read it again if you haven't read it. And it's fun to read. Okay? So, for instance, there's one time in there, I don't know if you remember the plot, but Jim is a slave who runs away. Okay? And he and Huck are floating down the Mississippi River, and what they're trying to do is they're going to run away. They're going to float. They're going to join. They're going to float down the Mississippi on this raft until they get to the Ohio River, where the Ohio hits into the Mississippi. Then they're going to pole up the Ohio until they get to free states, and Jim will be free. Okay. Now we get a hint from it because the reason that Jim is running away is that they've sold his family. He didn't run away because he had a family to take care of. When they sold his family, he couldn't find them. then he says, I'm getting away from here, okay? I'll just give you Huck has a father. There are a couple of scenes in there that make your skin crawl, who's a mean, vicious, horrible, ugly man. At one point, Huck learns to read finally, even though he's brought up by his father. His mother died, who's basically, the most despicable human being you could ever find. And when he learns to read from Tom Sawyer and Aunt Polly, right? And his father does nothing but mock him and jeer him. He's jealous of him. Oh, you think you're better than I am, and he's drunk, and he's just an evil, evil person. And Jim, who's portrayed as this poor, simple, illiterate slave who speaks, the accent is in thick dialect, right? One of the Southern black dialects, I don't know which one it was, right? He's the most decent, honorable human being that you could ever want to see. Twain never says it, but it comes through. So, for instance, they get caught in a storm on the Mississippi, and when they go, right, Huck is taking care of Jim, sneaking off the raft and bringing him food and all these kinds of things. But there's a storm, and they pass the mouth of the Ohio, and they keep floating farther south. Well, you figure Jim say, hey, I'm getting out of here, but he doesn't, right? And Huck is running from his father, too. He's afraid of his father, okay? Because he's got to take care of Jim. Jim has to take care of Huck. He understands that. A couple of charlatans get on, the king and the duke. I don't know if you remember that. Two con men. Oh, and Huck's so impressed. One's a king, one's a duke. And Jim says, watch out for these guys, right? In the end, one time, they hide the raft in some bulrushes on the side of the river, and Huck goes in to find some food, and he's adopted by this wonderful Southern family. He's taken as a son, and he keeps sneaking food down to Jim. And in the end, the Southern family are all killed in one of these feuds, like the Hatfield-McCoy feuds, right? One of these feuds, and they're all murdered, right? I mean, he just shows how stupid, and this is Southern gentry, how stupid they are. Okay, now in the end, okay, the reason you're not supposed to read the book, I'll say the word, Peppermint wants to sue me, Jim is often called Nigger Jim. If you read that epithet, Jim is called that every time he does something humane and decent, okay? So here's this word being used, but it's all metaphor. It's all double meaning. If you read the book, he's saying, I don't care about your breeding. I don't care what color you are. Are you a decent human being or not? And in the end, Huck as a human being, Huck is saved. He gets a soul, so to speak, by interacting with Jim, who is the most decent human being you could ever want to run into. I don't care how educated you are. He has magnificent values, and he can spot phonies a mile away. He knows decency. He knows honesty. He knows his responsibility. After all, he's an adult. Huck is just a kid. He's got to stay there and take care of them, even at the risk of his own life. Right? And at the end, Tom Sawyer shows up, and they have this elaborate plot for freeing Jim from slavery, even though it turns out Tom Sawyer knew Jim had already been freed, right, by his masters, right? And it's digging. Jim says, why can't I just walk out the door? No. Tom read a book, and he's got to dig a tunnel, and they dig the tunnel, and they do this, they do that. And after Jim finds out, after he went through all of this stuff, that Huck, that all the time Tom Sawyer knew that he was free, and it was all a ruse, he doesn't get angry, so they're kids. What am I going to do? I played the game with them. They're kids, right? So whether or not you read that book depends upon whether kids can understand metaphors, can understand double meanings. Because on the face of it, right, that epithet is used. There's no preaching. But if you understand metaphors, you understand double meanings, it's a most magnificent book about, human decency and how you have to judge each person as a person, and how human decency can also be infectious. How this basically little river rat, who was Huck, turns into a decent human being because he ran into a decent human being. I don't know about 7th grade. I don't think I'd read it then. But you've got to know, can the kids understand what Twain is about? When you explain it to them, can they get it? If they can't, I wouldn't read it, because it sounds like it's a book full of prejudices. And Twain himself said, I wouldn't have written it. If I couldn't write what I want, I couldn't say what I wanted to say, so I said it this way. And there's all kinds of sarcasms and wisecracks that don't seem like wisecracks. All kinds of jabbing at you know, the pretensions of society that Jim sees right through. Never says it. He never says this is baloney, but he talks to Huck in a way that, you know, eventually Huck catches on. All right. So, whoops. So what we have here then is this idea of thinking about your thoughts, being able to posit hypotheticals. Science requires that, right? It's very difficult to teach kids about their solar system when they see the sun moving and you're telling them it's really not, right? It's very difficult to say, listen, you close your eyes, you don't feel yourself moving, but you're spinning around like this in a circle. Right? We're spinning around in this. It's very difficult unless you can understand hypotheticals and abstracts. Does anybody remember studying I, the square root of -1? How many people remember thinking, I can write it down, but this makes no sense to me, right? I remember saying, what do you need this for? Okay, it's I. Okay, I can write it down and, you know, pass the test. Well, there's certain theoretical, hypothetical things in physics and all, you know. All right. Okay. I remember geometry. It took me a while to catch on to the idea that this is any triangle, that this is a theory. I finally got it. I told you I took geometry 3 times, right? Passed it. Anybody take geometry 3 times? I think I'm the winner, yeah? But 4, but I passed it all 3. Did you pass it every time? No, you didn't pass everything, so I still have the record. Barely, the first 2, but I managed somehow. All right, so, oh my God. I've been piddling with this slideshow, so I don't know what's going on here. Let me get it off here. So, let's look now into, here we go. Yeah, go ahead.
Explain the generate combinations and permutations one more time. I don't strike.
Yeah. In other words, what are all the possible combinations of 1, 2, 3, and of 1, 2, 3, and just 1, just 2, just 3, just 4. 1 and 2. Oh, no, combination of 2. 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1 and 4. Permutations are 1 and 2, 2 and 1. Right? Those would be 2 different ones. If you're at the dog tracks, the quinellas are combinations. Right? You pick the 2 dogs that finish first and second. The perfectas are permutations. You got to pick those dogs in the order. So a permutation is 1, 2, and 3 is different from 2, 1, and 3 is different from 3, 1, and 2. Right? Those are all permutations. And if I gave you enough time, you could generate them. All right, let's go back to the PowerPoint and look at the theoretical issues. You like that slide? Neither do I. I was going to put it on all of them, and then I didn't like it. Okay. The question is, are people active or passive for Piaget? The answer is active, oh boy. Okay? We are constantly reaching out, trying to make sense of our environment. We are internally motivated. I should put some exclamation points there. We are constantly internally motivated to try to construct better structures. And Piaget did, by the way, develop most of his theory from his own 3 children, actually from his first 2 his daughters, and he saw kids running around and looking. And that's one of the criticisms that was brought about Piaget. He only did it with a few people. Well, since then it's been done with thousands, and he was pretty right on. Few things at the edge. What is the relationship between learning and development? We learn by developing. Development explains learning. In other words, what you can meaningfully learn depends on your stage of a development. If you've memorized the multiplication tables and don't know that if you have 6 drawers with 4 marbles in each drawer, that you go 6 times 4 because it's just, you don't know what multiplication really means, it's probably a waste of time. You really haven't learned much that makes any sense. If you know the capitals of all the states and ask what's bigger, Austin or Texas, you haven't really learned much of anything meaningful. It's just rote memory. Okay? Piaget called that accommodation without assimilation. By the way, I'll tell you, come back to me for a second, one of the most interesting things you see is that you have kids who are trained with behaviorist techniques. They eat like this, right? So you come in and you do have a slow schedule of reinforcement. They come down, right? They come to the table, they get up, and they go like this. So now you train to come in, sit down, pull in the chair, pick up the spoon, and go like this, right? But if you change their seat to over here, here comes the camera, they're like this again. Or if you send them home, she was ready for me that time. If you send them home, okay, if you send them home, they're like this again. So the behaviorists say it didn't generalize, right? You didn't get generalized behavior. It's just this one specific thing. It's a word they use. We didn't go into the Piagetians say because it's accommodation without assimilation. They have one little rote test they can perform in very specific circumstances, but they don't understand what it's for, right? They don't get it. It's just rote learning. It's just just doing what the environment tells them without taking it in, okay? So the same son of mine. Remember, I said to you, "Oh, Daddy, why is that guy all black?" Right? We're shopping in the supermarket. He found out he's going. I sent him to a parochial nursery school. He finds out he's Jewish. Ask him, what does it mean? He says, "I don't know. I'm just Jewish." So we're shopping in a store. He says, and he's sitting in the desk. He says, "Let me down. I want to walk, please." Okay. He takes off. He runs up to the next guy. He pulls him, hits the person, looks down, sees a little kid. He says, looks up and he says, "Are you Jewish?" The person says, "No." I ran up to him. I said, "Stop doing that. You're not allowed to do that." He says, "Okay, I won't do it anymore." He takes off, hits the next person, but he had this look in his eye like he was penetrating into your soul. He says, "Are you Jewish?" The person says, "No," right? Okay, I said, "Cut that out. I'm going to sit you in here." He said, "Okay, I won't do it anymore." Takes off again, right? Let's go to about 6, 7 times. Finally, comes to some guy. He looks up into him. He gets this. He says, "Are you Jewish?" The guy looks at me and says, "Yeah, how did he know?" Right? He finally had to hit somebody. I said, "I'm the 10th person he's asked," right? He finally hits it. But he was like he was looking at him and he could look into your soul, right? So I say, well, don't ask people about their color. Don't ask if they're Jewish. And don't ask this and don't ask that. It's not 1,000 things. He finally got it. There are certain things that are acceptable to say with strangers and certain things that are not. He began to understand. And it's not a matter of teaching him one by one all the things you're not allowed to say. There were more. I mean, it was typical, right? One time he gets up we're on a subway again. I already knew not to ask people. We're on a cable car again. He gets up and he turns around in his seat with his knees and he looks at a lady. And she says, "Ooh, what a cute little boy." He goes, "Lady, you're poo-poo. I'm a big boy." I said, "Don't call people names like that. Just tell them you're a big boy, right?" She smiled. She said, "Oh, okay, you're a big boy." I said, "Don't use those words." So she laughed, right? I mean, it goes on and on. Now he doesn't do that anymore, right? He is a stand-up comic, however. Maybe that makes, okay? So in the end, he developed a sense of proper social interactions, which we'll get to with Kohlberg if we ever get there. And now there are 1,000 things he knows not to do. You didn't have to learn one by one, okay? Oh, well, hierarchies of time and hierarchies of space and one by one, the relationship between parts and wholes. You got the idea. And then if I tell you, if Flumferville is the capital of Pumferville, you know that Pumferville is bigger than Flumferville, even though you've never been there, because of how you think. Okay? So how you think determines what you can meaningfully learn. And if you think there are more fingers on this hand than on this hand, and then more on this hand than on this hand, you can't meaningfully learn how to add. You don't understand what a quantity is. Or let's go back to the PowerPoint. How do people change? They change by adapting to their environment, assimilation, accommodation, not by being pushed around, by trying to make meaning out of the world themselves. And of course, people are innately motivated by organization, adaptation. Remember, a subprofit, this is equilibration, the need to organize and make sense of the world, to be adaptive in your environment. Living things have to want to be adaptive in their environment. And for us, adaptation is thinking. That's our best way we adapt. Obviously, we breathe and all that stuff. But we've really been able to become the dominant species on this planet, except maybe for fire ants and killer bees, right? Because we've used our intellect to overcome our physical limitations. So we can fly better than any animal, and we can go deeper into the sea, deep in the sea, just as well as an animal in the ocean. And we can go faster than any animal, even though obviously just with our innate physical abilities, You know, the sprinter can run 20 miles an hour, but that's a big deal. Get in a car, you can go 110 miles an hour. I think the cop just pulled somebody over on the way here. It's probably only going 90, right? And we're very good at that. We can see things that that our eyes can't see with telescopes and with, you know, oscilloscopes. Boops, on the radar, oh, that's an electron. Boop, oh, that's a quark, right? Our intellect doesn't enable us to do that. And we don't know much from behavior. We have to know the logic that produces the behavior. Okay? One time I'm pouring water, right? Come back to me. I'm pouring. Okay, I'll give it to you. Come back to me if you can for a second. I'm working with a little girl. And this was for my master's thesis many years ago, but this stuck in my mind. And I had gone around, I was working in kindergartens and nursery schools, and I had to tell the teachers beforehand what I was doing. The supervisor told me to do that. So I come in, I take 2 rows of buttons, I line them up one to one, right? One right across the other. And the little girl tells me the same. Then I spread the one that's in front of her out. I said, are they the same? Do they still have the same number of buttons, or does one have more? Because she told me the same number. She said, they're the same. I said, how do you know? And she goes like this. I said, well, why did you say that? I said, what tells you that they're the same? I said to her, I got the right score. Why are you telling me that they're the same? She said, because the teacher told me that whatever question you ask, I should say the same. She had taken a course on Piaget, right? So I said, okay, that's good, you did it, but what do you really think? She said, they're more in front of me. I said, how do you know? She gives me a look like I'm an idiot. She said, take a look, right? It was obvious. Likewise, I'm working with a kid, he's 13 or 14, and I have water, right? And he tells me there's the same amount of water in 2 jars. And I took one, I poured it into a very narrow, thin beaker, and the water level went up higher. And I said to him, and I poured it all in there, I said, do they still have the same? He told me it's the same amount of water. I said, do they still have the same, or does one have more? Never say to kids you're testing which has more, because that's an adult telling a kid one has more. Got to give them both options. So he says to me, I think this is how we talk. I believe that the original one has more, the one that you did not pour. It shocked me, because everything else was concrete operation. He was 13 years old, 12 or 13. I said, well, how do you know? This is how we talked. He said, well, if we assume that my initial analysis was correct, even though we didn't have a proper measure, that my initial visual insight was correct and it was the same, he said, when you poured the water, clearly you could have not poured it all in. Certainly several molecules of water are still clinging to the original glass. Therefore, I must assume, if we make the initial assumption of equality, this is how he's talking, right? That there's more in the original one than in the one you pour, because some molecules of water stayed behind. He's right. That's concrete operational thinking, okay? Even though he said one has more. It's the logic that counts. That's why standardized tests, Piagetians are so adverse to standardized tests like the TACI test and IQ test. You don't know how the person got the answer. If somebody says 2 things cost 45 cents and you get change for $1 is 2 cents, and you say, how do you figure? You say, well, I figured in the tax. That's the right answer. That's good reasoning. If you say, no, it's wrong, it's got to be 10 cents, you don't know. You've got to know how people are thinking. The purpose of education is not to get a bunch of right answers, but to teach people how to think properly, to apply your thinking to real problems. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Of course, the question of how important thinking is all important. That's the purpose of education. Thinking, solving problems, thinking. People who are successful in the world, say Piagetians, are not the ones who have piled up a whole bunch of information. They're the ones who can think the best, who can apply problems, who can solve problems, who do things well. And there's more than one way to solve a problem. Okay, I got to tell you a story, though we're behind, right? There was once a student come back to me in physics, and the question on the physics exam was, you have a barometer in a building. How can you measure the height of the building? So he said, well, what you could do is measure the height of the barometer, then walk up the steps of the building and keep putting the barometer along the wall, right, as you kept going up and up and up. Then you could have the height of the building in barometer units, and then measure it. The barometer is a foot long. It's 2 feet long. Every barometer unit is 2 feet and figure it out. So he got a 0. So the professor said to him, so he protested. He said, I got the right answer. He said, well, you have to use physics. He said, okay, after physics, I'll tell you what. He said, you could take the barometer to the top of the building, drop it off, and time how long it was till you heard the crash. And from there, you could get a formula for there's a formula you can use in calculus for, the formula for things falling, and by timing, you can know exactly how far it fell. So the professor says, well, that's not the answer I want. So they brought in a neutral person to measure it. So he said, that's physics. He said, well, don't you have another answer? He said, yeah, I have another one. He said, you could take the barometer, tie it to the end of a rope, and put the barometer down on the ground, and then swing the rope. And remember, I told you, and see how long, right? Pick up the rope, right? Go to the end and drop it, and see how long the period was. And from the period, you could figure out the exact height, because that's all that matters from the swinging of a pendulum is the height of the string. This went on and on. Of course, the answer that the professor wants is you go to the top of the building, you see the difference in barometric pressure. So finally, the person asked him, he says, there were several other ways he gave. He said, don't you know the right answer? He said, of course I do. Don't you know the answer the professor wanted? He said, of course I do. But I'm sick and tired of having people tell me how to think. And interestingly enough, supposedly that happened to Niels Bohr, B-O-H-R, who was one of the great physicists at the time, discovered certain properties of gases, a great physicist. So this is the key, to have people think, and we should love original ways to do things. We should love kids coming up with oddball questions and oddball answers. The great Greek educational system did not rely on proper answers, but what it wanted to do is to see if students could ask relevant, proper questions. Thinking. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, Piaget's theory obviously places a heavy emphasis, the word that's blocked is heavy, upon thinking. But the word that Piagetians use for what Bandura calls self-efficacy is competence. It's crucial for kids to have a sense of competence when they're trying to learn tasks. A lack of competence leads to avoidance and failure. Okay? In other words, Piaget talked about that, about his point of view. If you are given a task, come back to me now for a second. If you are given a task and you are told, look, do this, fail, do this, fail, which is typical for kids who cannot understand the meaning of phonics and how building phonics make a word, right? They fail. They don't want to do it anymore. I had one kid, he would not do it. He hated it. I won't do phonics. So I had a computer, and we just sat around, and we did whole words. And then that little stinker, I saw him, we were working about a year, I see him trying to use phonics. He began to catch on to the logic. So I tried to do phonics with him. No, I hate that stuff. Well, this kid's 8 or 9. I'm smarter than he is. So I made up a game. And in the game was a little bit of phonics. But it was so well hidden, nobody could figure it out. It was part of a fun game. We play the game. We get to that part. He said, I'm not doing that stuff. I hate it. Caught me just like that, right? He had a sense of incompetence. I don't want to do it. Once you will hear teachers saying, if she would only try, she could do it. But she's not going to try. Because she knows if she tries, it's going to show her again how incompetent she is. It's going to attack her self-efficacy, whatever word you want to use. We'll see Eric's is going to use another word. Okay? So in the end, for Piagetians, emotions are important in that way. And people say to me, oh, you can't be right because now this kid is 10 years old and has the logical ability to understand phonics and still can't do it. And I say, well, you dig a hole 50 feet deep, right? You give the kid all kinds of stuff that she can't do and hates it and can't do it, and I hate it and I won't do it. And then you figure, oh, now you're old enough. Now we'll just pretend like nothing happened. That's one of the things that's wrong with try another reinforcement, fail again. There's a price to pay for that. Bandura spotted that when it came to Skinner's theory, and so did Piaget. Okay, now here are the stories, questions. All right, let's go to that PowerPoint. I didn't fill these in. The educational goals that are consistent with the theory is thinking, having kids think, and it's a problem-solving based methodology. The purpose of education is to have kids think. Okay? And I already told you, right, to solve problems, to explore questions, not to memorize information because it's good for them. If you want kids to know something about the American Revolution, you pose questions, you have them research ideas. What were the conflicts around the Constitution? What was going on here? Why were some people loyalists and some people rebels? Why did this happen? What's going on here? How do we do this? And if people go off in different directions, let them. Probably the best idea that is in schools is science fairs. When you go into a science fair, you have 200 kids in the gym. Any given kid only is pretty ignorant about 199 of those 200 projects, right? Just the one that she did or he did. That's all. Except that they've explored, they've looked at science. In many cases, they've worked with scientists. Some schools, smaller schools, are able to do that. They've understood the scientific method. They've understood what it means to research a problem. Often they can interact with, I've seen that even, saying, hey, if you had done this, even about a topic the kid didn't know about. Two kids discussing their projects and saying, okay, that's the idea. And ultimately, okay, here, let's go. The theory defines achievement as development of thinking, and a problem-centered environment where the learner is permitted to follow his own curiosity and to experiment with materials presented. Now, obviously, it's the teacher's job to present the materials. It's not just rote learning of predetermined skills and correct answers on a test. It's developing thinking. I know it's tough, but maybe you can do it on the side. Okay, here is my definition of learning disabilities from a Piagetian perspective. They're the normal reaction of normal children to being given tasks for which they are not developmentally ready. And the earlier we demand kids to do things, the more we're going to get of this. Multiply in third grade, phonics in kindergarten, please. Okay? Meaning, I've talked about that before. The kid doesn't understand what you mean. She or he is not developmentally ready, and that is why the kid does not understand. Okay? Okay. I got to tell you a story, and then we'll go on. Okay? Come back to me now. I teach in a Sunday school. This last Sunday, it won't be this last Sunday on the tape, but it's the last Sunday of the damn tape. Somebody comes up to me. She has a 5.5-year-old who has a very difficult time applying letters, names, and sounds and understanding the meaning of it. So she takes the kid to what I call one of these label shops. Kid gets tested. Oh, dyslexia. I said to her, it is perfectly normal for 5-year-olds not to get it. It's perfectly normal for 5-year-olds not to be able to make that connection, understand that relationship. And I said, what do you know now that you didn't know before? And what are they going to do? I said, I'm telling you, if they start to drill your son on these letter-son relationships, you're going to perpetrate a disaster. All these people who throw on the labels, they don't know what to do. Because they don't try to figure out what's wrong. But a 5-year-old not knowing that is perfectly normal. When I was in kindergarten, we didn't learn how to read. We played around with things, we grouped things, we colored. I learned how to tie my shoes. I still remember the little girl who had to tie my shoes for me. Her name was Ann, and she had red hair. This was 60 years ago. Oh, not quite. 50. And she said, come on, I'll show you how. So it took me a while. I learned how to tie my shoes, and I was the youngest kid in the class. I have an excuse. But anyway, right? We played around. We played with balance scales. We pounded on typewriters. You know what typewriters are? They're computers, but they don't have screens. One of my students comes to me. He said, my kid came to me. He said, what did you do today? He said, and the kid was in nursery school. He said, well, we played with this funny thing. We had typewriter. We played with computers, but they didn't have screens. Somebody donated a bunch of old typewriters that were no longer needed. So, right? So now, earlier. And I'm telling you, it's disastrous. It's disastrous. As long as my political platform. Go and see how many students who were educated in the United States are getting doctorates in physics or computer science or chemistry. See how many of the people educated in the United States, went to school in the United States, are on faculties of physics departments and chemistry departments and computer science departments. Go see here at the University of Houston. So all of this accountability stuff, things have not gone well. And these are all problem-solving fields, not just memorizing facts. Physics is not memorized. Chemistry is not memorizing the periodic chart of the elements. Most chemists can't tell you what it is. They just have a chart if they need it. It's thinking. And the more we have this, memorize and vomit it back, the worse our education is going to be. Okay, now I'm going to try something. I'm going to pick on somebody. Here we go. Take that. Tell us your name. Here's my student. Tell us your name.
Lynn.
Lynn, wave to the fans. Lynn's in 7th grade, and she cannot multiply. Don't worry, this is going to be a little rough, but we'll have a therapist for you afterwards.
Okay.
So I say to Lynn, listen, Lynn, you're going to learn to multiply, or we're going to get down on you. So I say to Lynn, give wrong answers. How much is 7 times 7?
35.
Stupid Lynn, everybody. Stupid Lynn, stupid Lynn. We all start going, right? Okay, dumbbell, let's see if you know the next one. And I continue to humiliate her. And finally, in a month, out of pure self-defense, she learns the multiplication tables. Remember, she's been trying to learn them since the 4th grade. Certainly since the 5th. 7th grade, I did it. Just so she won't be humiliated in front of the class. You okay? Need a therapist?
No.
I'll contribute. Okay? How many people think, let's take a vote, that by doing this I'm a good teacher? How many people think that's a rotten way to be a teacher? Oh boy, are you right. Why? Why? Explain to me why it's a rotten way to be a teacher. Come to me. Come back, put your back to me. Why is it a rotten way to be a teacher? 3 years they've been trying to teach her. I did it. I did it. Nobody else could do it. Tell me why. Tell me. I accomplished my objective. I got her to learn the multiplication tables. Go ahead.
She's now going to hate math forever.
Okay, she can hate math forever. She'll hate me forever, but who cares? Go ahead.
I would say if a teacher worked with a student long enough and has that strong motivation, yes, it is possible for that student to actually learn something.
But is the way I did it, is that okay, by humiliating her?
Well, sometimes, the hard way is always the better way to get people to learn.
You think it's okay to humiliate students? I don't think it's a good idea. I think it's a terrible idea. Go ahead.
Their confidence.
Lack of confidence, maybe?
Their self-esteem.
Self-esteem? Go ahead.
It could have backfired on you.
How could it backfire?
She could have never learned. She could have just memorized.
It could have backfired, but meanwhile, nothing else has worked. How many people think it could do serious... What's wrong with it? I mean, just as human beings, what's wrong with it? It's mean, somebody said, yeah. See, all of you who don't like this idea, some of you are talking about, first of all, it may not be, by the way, it's not going to work. You're right. Whoever, tell me your name. Yeah.
Jessica?
Yeah, Jessica. That's only the 9th time I've asked her name. I asked her 50. All right? Jessica's right. It's not going to work. I'm telling you that right now. She's just going to drop out of school, right? But those of you who said self-esteem, mental health, self-esteem, and she's going to hate it and all this stuff, mental health is a very important part of teaching, okay? And what we're going to do now is go into a few people who are going to talk about mental health. As a matter of fact, we already had hints from Bandura and Piaget with self-efficacy and competence. Bandura already told us with the self-efficacy research, people who feel good about themselves learn better than people who don't feel good about themselves, even if they know less initially. And ultimately, we're going to get people saying, school ought to be a place to encourage students' mental health. The fact that most kids hate school, or I don't want to go to school, I have to go to school today. How many people got up in the morning and say, wow, I can't wait to go to school? There must be some people. Nobody?
For the duration of school?
No, just today. What?
Maybe the first couple years of school.
Yeah, first and second grade. Maybe.
Then I learned better.
Know. So we're going to talk about Freud. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Freud is... very few ed psych courses will show you Freud. But I want to do it because he's really the father of the other theories that came. Either they developed from his or the reactions to his, the ones that are more powerful. Okay, there's old Siggy right there with his cigar. When most of you think about Freud, you think about this, right? Somebody on a couch. Okay? And Freud's theory is a psychosexual theory. Already it's got to be more fun than all the other stuff, right? Psycho, man, right? That's why I put it in a little relief, right? Okay, sex is something that brings bodily pleasure. It's not only genital, right? Like eating a candy bar after you're full. Okay, and he talks about the libido. The libido is sexual energy, okay? But, oops, sorry. The libido is sexual energy. Okay, that's where our energy comes from, because Freud's going to say we're basically motivated by sexual energy. Pleasure, we're motivated, we're a pleasure-seeking creature. Okay, I don't like this theory too much, but it's fun. And he talks about, and by the way, it's the granddaddy, things like the subconscious, unconscious motivations, things that happened to us when we were children still influence us today, right? He's the one who figured all that out. Okay, and he talked about an erogenous zone, an area of the body on which sexual energy is concentrated, i.e., an area of the body that brings pleasure. So for infants, it's obviously which area of their body that brings pleasure. There, everybody's pointing their mouth, right? Okay, eventually it goes to the genitals, mostly, but anybody here, even after you're absolutely full, couldn't eat another bite and somebody brings your favorite dessert and you'll eat it? Yeah, see? Yeah, sure. That's for pleasure, not because you need the food. You're still caught in all of us. By the way, after we finish this theory, as we go along this theory, you're going to say, oh my God, I'm crazy. Right? Believe me, we're all going to be crazy by this theory. But just take a look at it so you can see some of the things he's talking about. Okay, Freud has both personality constructs and stages of development. There are the personality constructs. There are the stages of development. We're going to do the personality constructs first. Freud talks about the id. See, it's red. It's hot. Afterwards, the colors were just arbitrary. Okay? The id, it's innate. Everyone is born with an id. You all have it. That's the fundamental nature of your personality. You're an id creature. It's motivated by pleasure. That's who you fundamentally are, motivated by pleasure. And as I said, the pleasure zones jump from different places in your body. That's what his stages are, where the pleasure zone is. It's the source of your energy, of your libidinal energy, your sexual energy. Remember, it means more than just, it's all pleasure. It contains the basic drives like hunger and thirst. And when you don't get what you want, when your pleasure is frustrated, aggression, anger, and destruction. So here was Freud says. We'll keep picking on Lynn, right? Okay. Here's what Freud says the basic nature of my personality is. Here's Lynn. Lynn, will you give me all your jewelry, please? Do you want to give me your jewelry?
No.
So she says, no. So I'm going to smash her and kill her and take her jewelry. She's frustrating me, and I want it. That's the basic nature of a human being, says Freud. When we get to Maslow, he's going to say, I don't think so. But let's take a look. Okay. And it contains no logic or rational thoughts, just wants. I want it. And if you frustrate me, I'm going to get you. Okay? And Freud is going to say, pathological criminals are just id-driven creatures with nothing else going on. However, Freud says that's the basic nature of people. He said, but very soon, let me ask you a question. Why don't I now, by the way, it really is nice jewelry, why don't I go and smash her, give her a concussion, or kill her if it's necessary, at least, you know, and steal her jewelry? Why don't I do it?
Because there are witnesses?
Yeah, what are you, stupid? You got all these witnesses. What are you, an idiot? Wait until you can get her in the dark and then get her, right? That's right. Wait till you can get her alone. And if I say, you know, I don't really know her that well, and she'll be suspicious because we never see each other side of the class, maybe I better rob somebody else's jewelry, okay? That comes from, Freud says, the ego. The ego, says Freud, it develops as the id comes into contact with reality. I can't have whatever I want whenever I want. Particularly I'm a little kid, and my parents say, no, what am I going to do? My grandson now, whenever you tell him no, he has this monkey he drags around. You know the monkey thing? He goes, monkey, monkey. He's not quite 2 yet. Monkey. Which means you're frustrating me and the monkey's my friend, right? Tell him no. Can't have it, right? Comes in contact with reality. And eventually, right, when you finally, if you keep doing that, I'm going to give you this, you keep throwing it, you can't have it anymore. So if you want it, you got to stop throwing it. That's very frustrating. I want to throw it, and I want to have it back to throw it again. But the id comes into contact with reality. You come in contact with reality, and you develop an ego. And it's governed by the reality principle. You have to do what's reasonable. It's not reasonable to mug her now, to steal from her now. It's not reasonable to find a place to mug her when nobody will catch me. All right, I'll go and I'll mug somebody else. Take the other person's jewelry. If I really want that jewelry, I'll figure out how to get her alone and steal it. Those people are dangerous. Watch out. They're very clever. They're motivated by the id and the reality principle, and they don't have they don't have a conscience, okay? The ego uses reasoning in order to come to conclusions. Reasoning says, this is probably not a good idea, too many witnesses. And it serves as a check on the id. It delays actions until they are reasonable, until I can get her alone in the parking lot at night with no one else around. She left, by the way, and she's calling the police. Okay? Now, Freud also says, however, okay, that eventually we develop a superego, and we'll see how this happens. Okay? The superego, I guess it's supposed to be for purity, I don't know why I made it way, develops as a result of internalizing parental standards and values. Okay? And it has two aspects. Most of you know the aspect that's called the conscience, which tells us no, 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 no. But it also has the ego ideal, which tells us what to do. Okay? Most people talk about the conscience, but let's go. So the conscience of the superego, it tells us what not to do and punishes us. Remember, this is inside of you. If you do something wrong by making you have feelings of, go ahead, guilt. Guilt. Don't worry. I would feel so guilty if I mugged you in the car. Even if that Jew was with him, I just couldn't do it. Guilt. Right? I get extra change in the store, you know, they make a mistake in the supermarket, I have to give it back. Interestingly enough, there are people, I admit I'm one of them, when I'm in a casino, if they make a mistake, tough luck. Because the ego, the superego is gone. I'm out here to get your money. I'm rigging the games. Well, if you screw up, the heck with you. I'm getting it back from you. Casinos are a very id-oriented kind of a situation. Not so that you'd rob it, but it's just, I don't know. Okay, guilt. Guilt is your internalized parent telling you, no, 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 no. That's bad. Okay? When you see where this comes from, okay? And the ego ideal, however, is the other way around. The ego ideal tells us what to do. It's the positive aspect of the superego. Okay? It provides goals for life. It's the source of our ideals. Okay? They're things you're supposed to do, not just things you're not supposed to do. I hope at least some of you are being teachers because you think it's important to educate the next generation. It's an important thing to do. Or, anybody here want to be an art or a music teacher? How many, just two of you? 3 of you? Who wants to be an art teacher? Yeah? 4 of you? You get the feeling that art is disappearing from American society and you've got to hold on. It's such a precious commodity. Yeah, that's... Anybody want to be a music teacher? No music teachers? Yeah. I knew a music teacher once. He said, he's the one who gave me this thing. He said, you don't turn on the television to hear math equations. I got it from him. He said, music, you hear music. I want people to understand it, to hear it, to appreciate it. And this guy, he loved all kinds of music. He was in an orchestra. He was in a band. He liked hard rock. I mean, he says, you just have to listen to it. He said, that's an ideal, okay? Now, Now, Freud says, by the way, if you look back here, you can see something very interesting. The id is innate. It's innate. It's the first thing we really had that something is just flat out innate. That's what you are, a pleasure-seeking creature. The superego is learned. You get it from your parents, right? Internalizing parental standards. Whoops. And the ego sounds like Piaget. Interactive. You develop by interacting with the environment, you develop your ego. So I never knew how to put this kid. Now, Freud talks about stages of development and says we develop through these stages. As we develop through these stages, by the way, the ego and the superego emerge. So let's have some things about Freud's stages. So this is going to get. Each stage is named for the area of the body in which sexual energy is centered. Okay? The stages are sequential, but they are not hierarchical. Well, I'll explain this again better with sequential means they come in an order. Hierarchical means, and I'll show you this again when we get to Maslow. I'll explain it more thoroughly. But hierarchical means you've got to get one right before you go to the next one. Okay? You have to get sensory motor down pat before you're going to go on to pre-operational. Pre-operational isn't exactly. You have to get concrete operational down. Fundamentally, you have to be completely concrete operational. Then and only then will your reasoning allow you to say, there are problems here, you go on to formal operational. You're not going to find a person who's 78% formal operational, 20% concrete operational, 2% sensory motor. It doesn't work that way. You've got to get one right before you go to the next one. You've got to get it equilibrated. Okay, you've got to get it met. You've got to finish it completely. That's hierarchy. Freud says, my stages are not hierarchical. They come in a sequence, but you don't have to get one right before you go to the next one. And if you don't get it right, what is deprived is going to constantly keep influencing your personality. Right? You're going to see leftovers from the previous stages as you go on to higher stages. Like, how many people here, when you're under tremendous pressure, you might as well just move, like you're studying for an exam, you might as well just move your desk right next to the refrigerator because you're 8. Come on, raise your hand, admit it. I'm one of those. Yeah? No. Nobody? What a bunch of liars. Okay, there are a lot of people like that. That's getting pleasure from the oral stage while you're under pressure. How many people here, you've got to study for this test. The time is limited. What are you going to do? But you have to stop and arrange your desk and make your desk as neat as possible. Well, even though you don't have time to do it. Here you go, back to the anal stage. Anal compulsive, left over from anal. Well, a lot of people. How many, and okay, so you see where we're all not. Okay, so he says, So let's go back to the PowerPoint. So what's not, so you're influenced by previous stages. And regression to previous stages, going back to previous stages, or fixation to stage, which means that all of a sudden your personality is fixed. There are certain aspects of your personality that are fixed at a given stage. And you can't, right? And they're constantly coming through, they can occur. Okay? Usually people have fixations of the personality at a given stage, and then they can regress. Anybody a smoker? Or used to be a smoker, you'll notice, yeah? When you got under pressure, you smoked a lot more, didn't you? Yes, that's a fixation at the oral stage, right? Oral pleasure in your mouth. That's one reason why often patches don't work, because you don't get the oral pleasure. And then when you're really under pressure, you regress, and all you're doing is sucking on that cigarette like you did on a nipple, right? That's what he says. Nothing personal. Don't worry. I have half of you crazy. I'll make the other half of you crazy too. Okay, so let's start to take a look at these stages. The oral stage. Freud says at the oral stage, energy from the libido, your sexual, let's go back to PowerPoint. Energy from the libido, your sexual energy is centered on the mouth. Okay? And it's the age where it's normal is infancy. And it has two periods. It has the early period of first few months of life are characterized by narcissism. Does anybody know? He took a lot of his stuff from Greek mythology. Does anybody know who Narcissus was? Who was Narcissus? Tell us.
He fell in love with his reflection, and he
Right.
drowned, or no, he died because he couldn't eat because he was always staring at his reflection in
Right.
a pool of water.
Narcissus, he bent down to take a drink of water, saw us in the reflection, said, "Why? That's my God, that's the most beautiful person I ever saw." And in the end, he spent his whole life saying the reflection, he starved to death, right? Narcissism is self-love. Freud is going to tell you there are a lot of people who have narcissistic personalities. I'm the best, I'm the greatest, everything for me. I'm the most wonderful, the world centers around me. He said they're fixated at this early stage. So the early period, the first few months of life, is characterized by narcissism. Matter of fact, not only Freud, but other people will tell you that very, very young infants can't really differentiate self from other. They can't really say, well, I'm something and the breast is something else, and we're two separate entities. None of that stuff. It's part of me. What happens later, though, when the kid gets the cognitive ability to do that, the breast can be taken away. So this period is characterized by the urge to bite. You bite down on the breast, and then you can keep it there. You got a few teeth, right? You can keep it there, so it won't go away. And by separation anxiety, it can be taken away. So right away, just by being human, by being an infant and nursing, or a bottle, either one, right? Anxiety. Anxiety comes. It's inevitable. Full of anxiety. Okay? Now, oral fixation, which means what happens if you don't get enough oral pleasure? Okay? Which, as you can see, none of us do, because there's this anxiety. What can happen? People who are oral, who have oral fixations, who have oral aspects to their personality still bubbling up because they didn't get it all right, right? There's a preoccupation with oral activities like eating, biting. Anybody bite down on a pencil when you're nervous? I used to bite on the back of my hand. Teachers come take it during tests. Biting on pencils. Biting on the end of your eyeglasses. Anybody do that? Yeah. Smoking. Anybody know what loquacious means? Talking too much. Loquaciousness. I have a lot of oral aspects to my personality. When I get under pressure, I have this overwhelming urge to tell a joke. That's an oral fixation. You heard about the person that were in a kayak, the guy was in a kayak? Heard about this? He was in a kayak, and he got very cold, so he tried to make a fire to get warm, and burned up the boat and he drowned. The moral of the story is, can't have your kayak and heat it too. Yeah, you know. overwhelming urge to tell jokes, okay? That's all kinds of things. People have said that America is an oral society. If you were to go in the 1950s and so see how people drink, they drink like normal human beings. They take the bottle, pour it in a cup, and they drink it. Only Americans took the end of the bottle and sucked on it. I know one guy said he went to, right? Or put a straw in and sucked on it. Oral. Regressions are characterized by a temporary fixation with oral activities due to stress or frustration. Constant chain smoking. Eating constantly when you're under stress. By the way, boredom can be stress. How many people, when you're bored, you eat? Woo, there's an oral fixation. I'm one of them. As a matter of fact, I can't think of too many times when I don't eat. By the way, the only time that I'm not hungry is when I'm playing poker. It's like one addiction for another, right? But that's a different one, when I don't want to eat, okay? Stronger a fixation, the more likely a regression to that stage is. There are some people, I'll talk about severe regressions, they will get depressed, they will lock themselves in a room. There was a book called The 50-Minute Hour. You know, it's 50 minutes for a second. It was written many years ago. But this guy had a patient. She would just eat and eat and eat and eat. She would spend a week and do nothing but eat when she got under severe stress. Okay? That's a regression. She's like a little kid sucking on the breast. Okay? Now, the anal stage, don't worry, we'll get to the genitals soon, then everybody will be happy. The anal stage, which is about 1.5 to 3 years old, we know what happens here. The energy from the libido is centered on the anal zone and its products, right? And of course, you're asked to renounce pleasure. The child's asked to renounce instinctive pleasure by becoming toilet trained. Don't, right? Don't do it wherever you want, whenever you want, wherever it feels good. You got to do it in there at that time. Oh, God, you did it in the potty. Oh, wonderful. Kids don't like that. This usually results in anger and testing of parents. By the way, anyone who's had kids will know this, right? The S word. My first kid was born in Israel. The S word, that was the one American curse word that everybody knew. So my wife and I vowed, and let's not say it in public. We would say other words in public because nobody knew what it meant. But that word we never said. We never said it in front of him, right? One day I put him in the shower. Before I could take his diaper off, I turned around, right? I put him in the... In Israel, the showers were just like on the floor, right? And then there's a drain to go in there, right? So I stand him up there, I turn around. He's got the stuff and he's smearing it all over the wall, going, shit. Where did he learn the word? Oh, he was playing with it. He loved it. Oh, yeah. Fortunately, it was in the, I could just spray it all out, but unbelievable, right? But then we say, can't do that anymore. You got to be toilet trained. And you get anger and the testing of parents. And there are two ways that parents are tested. One is, I'm going to do it where I want it, wherever I want it. Right? I'm not going to be toilet trained. The other one is, oh, kids want me to do it there? I'm not doing it. Right? Everybody who's had kids, the kid has done one or the other. Anybody ever had a kid who did that? Wouldn't go to the bathroom for 2 days, 3 days? Yeah, it's common. There's one person with a kid. It scares the bejeebers out of you, right? I had one of each, right? It scares you. The other one, oh, I'm doing it wherever I want, whenever I want. So what happens? Freud says, how does this get itself in the... That's the second way I'm not doing it is called anal retentive. I'm keeping it to myself. I'm not putting it where you want me to put it. Those people are neat freaks. I got to clean my desk before I can do anything. Neat freaks, right? Order, organized, everything. So Freud said that if you're, by the way, this is Freud's explanation of a severe obsessive compulsive disorder. I will tell you now, by the way, that there are two kinds of obsessive compulsive disorders. They have medicine to stop it, right? One, by the way, and I worked in a clinic with a psychiatrist who said, it's a pill that just makes your brain incapable of engaging in obsessive compulsive disorder. He said, this stuff can be very dangerous. He said, it ought to be given in a hospital. He turned out to be right. He was Irv Kraft. He was a very bright guy. guess he still is. He's retired now. He said, some people take it, it's like a miracle. All of a sudden, these behaviors are gone and they can live a normal life. And some people break it and they literally have, some people take the pill and they have psychotic breakdowns. That's why I said you got to be in the hospital. Psychotic breakdowns, because this is what's tying that person together. Everything's got to be just so. And when they can't do it, they flip out. That's a very important scientific term, right? They go nuts. Now, all of us have some of it. How many people check your alarm clock 3 times before you go to bed, just to be sure you said it? Yeah. How many people have to go back into the house to check that you turned everything off before you go on a vacation? Yeah, see? We all have a little of that. But there are some people, so it's compulsive, they have to wash their hands 87 times. Right? Back. And they go, push it down, what?
How did that get related to anal?
He says, this is retenting, holding it in. I'm going to do it. I've got to control it my way. I'm going to control everything. And complete control. And he says it gets extreme. Neat freaks. And of course, there's anal expulsive. I'm going to do it wherever I want. I'm going to make a mess wherever I want. Sloppy, messy, disorganized, never coming on time. How many people here, here's the choice. You're going to come 5 minutes early and you're going to be the only one there and you're going to look around, or you're going to come 5 minutes late and you'll come a little late, but everybody will be there. How many people would rather come early and be the only one there? How many people would rather come late? Yeah, that's the first have more retentive personalities, the second have more expulsive personalities. Okay? Boy, we got a lot of anal retentive people here. By the way, it doesn't surprise me. Schools are anal retentive. Do your homework on time. It's got to be this way. It's got to be done. This is the rule. Do it. Got to get the papers in. It's very difficult for kids who are not retentive. I had a tough time in school because I'm not. So your notebook's not neat. So what? So the homework's a day late. So what? So you're 1 minute late to class. So what?
And yet your papers are so anal retentive. Your papers are so anal retentive.
We all have that. Ooh, when I correct papers, I am so it's unbelievable. A friend of mine once said, read this paper. I don't care about the punctuation or that stuff. I just slept off the. Tell me to think about it. So I'm reading, and all of a sudden I'm 3 lines down, and I feel like a demon has my hand to go back in and put in the comma. Right? We all have both aspects of of this in our personality. Normal people have both aspects in their personality. They're not overwhelmed by one or the other. Okay? I just want to tell you, those who are anal retentive, you get on our nerves as much as we get on yours. It's got to be just so. Leah, leave me alone. What the hell's the difference? Oh, you can see it just came out. That word came out. I didn't even want to say it. Those of you who have to order and organize and we get on your nerves, it's mutual. Okay, let's go back here. And as I said already, obsessive compulsive behaviors can be traced to this stage. Now, all of us have aspects of both. Those of you, let me ask you, those of you who say you're neat freaks, how many of you, if the lawn doesn't get mowed, right? You see, so we all, a lot of hands went up. We all have aspects of that. We once had a guy in our faculty who got cited by the fire marshal for having an office that was so sloppy, I swear to you. But somebody who knew him said, his lawn is so neat you would swear he took a ruler and a scissors and cut every blade of glass the same, like to the nearest 1,000th of an inch. Okay? Okay. Next time, we'll go into the general state. I just want to tell you something about, come back to me, I use the word inch. Those of you who've been told the metric system is wonderful, forget it. It's an attack on our whole society. The traffic's just millimetering along. Anybody know damn Yankees? You gotta have heart. Kilometers and kilometers and kilometers of heart. First down and 9.3247 meters to go. How tall's a basket? I can see my grandson asked me, Grandpa, how tall's a basket? I can't say 10 feet. I have to say, 3.26478 meters. What's the difference from first base to second base? Not 90 feet. 28.32674 meters. Come on, give me a break. Give me a break. You know, inchworm? No, it's a 2.54 millimeter worm. Come on, will ya? Horse races, furlongs, 1/8 of a mile. Go ahead. You want to fight with me? The metric system was fine for scientists. The rest, leave us alone with this beautiful, interesting system. All right, next time we'll finish this, and what we're going to look into is people who are then disagreed with Freud. That's going to be humanism, and probably somebody else will do that. And we're going to look at people who extended this to the social realm. But let's finish Freud's theory first. We're getting to the good stuff. All right, see you next time.